Good evening, wrestling fans. We're your hosts, Lewis
and Jaden, and this is
Evolution of Pro Wrestling. Tonight, fans, we're in for a great topic. We're going to be talking about the greatest factions of all time, from the past, present, and future. I can name a whole bunch. We're going to start off today with this faction called The Corporation, which was one of my personal favorites, held by Vince McMahon. He had a whole bunch of people. He had The Rock. He had Ken Shamrock. He had the Big Boss Man. The Corporation was this faction that was against guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin and guys like Mankind, that pretty much Vince McMahon didn't want to see these guys progress in the industry.
Now, Dad, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Who led the Corporation?
Well, Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon actually led the Corporation, but there was a bit of a friction in that corporation at the time because Shane McMahon was drunk with power in that corporation. But Vince McMahon said, no, I'm the boss. I'm the one that is going to control this corporation. And because of the corporation, that was the first time that The Rock ever became the world heavyweight champion in the WWE, which that's when everybody saw the heel turn and a brand new version of The Rock that transcended his career to new heights. Nothing compared to some of the factions we got today. You know, yeah, we got the New Day, we had the Shield, we had Evolution, but I'm an old school guy, Jaden, and I think to me, none of the old school factions could compare to...
No, Dad. I disagree. I feel like new school can compare to old school now.
Why? Why would you figure
let's take the Shield. Let's take the Shield, for example.
Okay.
The Shield came in through NXT. Seth Rollins was the one to create the Shield. It started back as Survivor Series in 2012. Ryback versus John Cena versus CM Punk. That's when Ryback shell-shocked John Cena and was about to win the match, and the Shield attacked. They triple powerbombed him, Ryback, through the table. Now, ever since that day, the Shield has been a dominant force.
Well, they were a dominant force before the Shield broke up.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
No, but you're absolutely right. They were really strong combination when it came to certain factions in the industry. Now, you had other factions like DX and Evolution, which I think maybe the Shield can live up to it, but you got factions of Evolution like Triple H, Batista, Ric Flair, and Randy Orton, who all of them came out to be excellent stars, excellent superstars to legends. Ric Flair became a Hall of Famer. Batista ended up going to this star-studded WrestleMania 21 where he won the World Heavyweight title against Triple H. Triple H became more than the Game. He became the cerebral assassin. Randy Orton was just a viper after that. He just took over the industry as a young and upcoming hungry wrestler. You know, and when you compare this faction of Evolution to back then, to me, by far, the greatest faction of all time, the Four Horsemen. The Four Horsemen had Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, and they had Ole Anderson, and before they had Barry Windham. But to me, I think Barry Windham was the original Four Horsemen in that group. I don't think you could compare Evolution to the Four Horsemen.
Now, Dad, I'm going to have to disagree with you. Top four, I think the best faction is the Nexus. The Nexus was a really, really, really strong faction. You know, there were a couple of rookies from NXT, but they made their debut on WWE when they attacked John Cena on Raw and destroyed the entire Raw roster.
No, that was a heck of an impact. But come on, the Four Horsemen took on everybody. The Four Horsemen took on Sting. They took on Lex Luger. They destroyed the WCW roster. Yes, Nexus came on. Okay, they came on. Wayne Barrett, Ryback, and everybody else came on and destroyed everybody. But it was for a little while before he came out. They just dismantled. the Four Horsemen kept going and destroyed everybody. Like, can you really compare the Nexus to the Four Horsemen?
Yes,
Seriously.
you can compare the Nexus to the Four Horsemen. Anybody that got in the Nexus way was destroyed. Anyone. You can go from factions to anyone. Anyone got destroyed by the Nexus. That's what makes them a really powerful faction, because they had the key to all factions. They worked together as a team.
Okay, I give you that. But are you trying to say that the Nexus was more powerful than the NWO? The NWO. Come on.
Personally, yes.
No, I don't. No. Now you're going crazy, son. I'm sorry, fans. To me, the NWO was a powerful faction that you had Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, The Big Show. These guys, they were phenomenal in WCW. They were the talent that brought this industry into the Monday Night Wars. How can you compare Nexus to the NWO?
Now, I'm not knocking the NWO off. They were a really, really good faction. But the Nexus had 7 men all going for an entire roster full of WWE superstars.
I don't know. I think, to me, the NWO was a stronger faction. And you want to talk about faction, old school factions, you had the Heenan family. You had King Kong Bundy, Andre the Giant, Big John Studd, Paul Orndorff, Mr. Perfect. These old legends, to this day, that are not with us anymore, I don't think you could compare certain legends to the factions of the new. These legends paved the way for these new factions, which I think if there would have ever been a dream match or whatever, or some sort of factions, I think the old school would have took it, in my opinion. That's just me.
As you were saying of the Four Horsemen going and going and going, let's talk about the New Day. See, now, Xavier Woods was the person to form the New Day, but ever since they formed the New Day, they've been one of the hottest factions going on in the WWE right now.
Okay. No, I give you that. They went from their first WrestleMania that a lot of people were just booing them because they were face, but then they ended up turning heel and getting their career up there. Then the following year, they ended up hosting WrestleMania, which a lot of people were not expecting. And you're right. New Day is an excellent faction. Kofi Kingston, Xavier Woods, and Big E. Excellent talent. They all got great talent. But I don't think they would have been able to live up to like the faction called the Fabulous Freebirds, which took over WCCW back in the days. They had their rivalry with the Von Erichs. The Von Erichs were also a faction, the Older Brothers, which are not with us anymore, unfortunately. But the Fabulous Freebirds had Terry Bam Bam Gordy, Buddy Rogers, and Michael P.S. Hayes, which by far made a major name for themselves in WCCW and WCW and the WWE. Can you mean to tell me that you try to compare the New Day to the Fabulous Freebirds?
You can compare them to the Fabulous Freebirds. Kofi Kingston.
I don't think so.
They each have 3 places. Big E is the muscle. See, now I'm not really sure with what Xavier Woods does, but Kofi Kingston's the acrobat. Kofi Kingston is the person to shock you.
Well, let me change that. Xavier Woods, he is a great entertainer, and he does have great talent. He's an excellent wrestler. He had skills in the ring. But he's to me, I think he's the hype man that gets them hype.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I agree.
But to me, as I said, I'm old school, Jaden. I love the old school factions, like the Triple Threat. You never heard of the Triple Threat. Triple Threat had Bam Bam Bigelow, Shane Douglas, and Chris Candido, which unfortunately Chris Candido and Bam Bam Bigelow are no longer with us. Excellent talent. They wreaked havoc in ECW. Took on everybody. Took on Taz, Sabu. But, come on. Those two would take on any faction that you bring into them, including the New Day. Maybe the Shield could take them on. I don't think so. But, that's...
I'm sorry, Dad, but I have to disagree.
Why?
The Shield, man. The Shield can take on anyone. That's what I love about the Shield. The Shield can take on any faction. Now, let's go to Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns is the muscle of the Shield. Back when the Shield was heels, Roman Reigns was the quiet person. He was the muscle. Seth Rollins is now called the Kingslayer since he slayed the king. Before that, he was known as the Architect.
Okay.
Dean Ambrose is the lunatic. Dean
Of
Ambrose
course,
is
he's
the
the
crazy
lunatic
one.
French. Of course, he's always the one that took a lot of chances for the Shield. I understand that, and they went undefeated for I think nearly 2 years. But I don't know. Like, you got to see certain aspects in factions. When you have factions that coming up from the 80s and the 90s. Look at DX, for example. Triple H and Shawn Michaels, that made the Attitude Era in the 90s, that these guys went crazy, and God knows the things they did on TV that people didn't even want to see, but eventually it caught the eye of the fans, but I think that when the DX dismantled and the new DX came in, I think they were more powerful than before when they had Triple H, X-Pac, and the Road Dogg Jesse James and Billy Gunn. Those are the type of factions that we need now compared to the factions we have now. Yeah, the New Day's okay. All right, big deal. The Shield, I give them their respect. Excellent. But it's like you can't compare the New Day. You have factions like Evolution. Evolution was an excellent faction.
I agree.
They wreaked havoc. That was where Batista and Randy Orton were born. That made them the stars that they became in WWE, which Randy Orton is still currently a awesome superstar.
And as we know, Ric Flair had a really creative part in the Evolution. Ric Flair was like, I could say Ric Flair was the cheater. Ric Flair made his team win. He would do stuff to distract referees and other people.
That's why he's called the dirtiest player in the game, because he is Ric Flair, 16-time world champ. He pretty much paved the way for the Evolution stars. Triple H became the Cerebral Assassin, the Game, the King of Kings, and Randy Orton became the Viper. He became, without a shadow of a doubt, of this person that no one's ever seen before. That he's a third generation wrestler. I'm sorry. Then Batista. Batista is an animal. They called him the Animal, Batista, for a reason. Ric Flair took that animal out of him, But I think if there was a faction that I would want to see fight against each other, I would want to see Evolution against the Shield. That would be a dream match that many people would see as a faction. But look at this. Look at everything now. These superstars went from these factions to the next level. Seth Rollins ended up leaving the Shield, joining the Authority, and now look at him. He's won this year's Royal Rumble, and he's going to WrestleMania to fight Brock Lesnar. Dean Ambrose, another one. He left the Shield. He ended up winning Money in the Bank and becoming WWE champion. But I don't know. You also got, I could never forget this faction, the Hart Foundation. The original Hart Foundation started off with Bret the Hitman Hart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and Jimmy Hart. But then it just shifted towards the 90s when you had Bret Hart and Brian Pillman and Owen Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. And the British Bulldog. That was a powerful faction at the time. And they were going up against DX. Those two were at war, especially Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart within that faction. And that's what led up to their battle with the factions. But that's what I'm saying, Jaden. I don't think you could compare this time of age of factions to the old school. I'm sorry.
Now,
I'm just going to keep arguing with that.
I agree that. I disagree. Sorry. I disagree with that. There's certain factions in this new age that you can compare to the old ages.
Okay, give me one good faction in the new day, in this new industry compared to old school.
A faction that I can compare to old school, and this one hasn't been mentioned a lot, but the Wyatt family. The Wyatt family, they were insane. The Wyatt family was crazy. Now, they had big men. They had Braun
Strowman, Eric
Bray
Rowan.
Wyatt, Eric Rowan, and Luke Harper. Now, Braun Strowman was the black sheep. He was the upcoming superstar. He was the late joiner of the Wyatt family.
Well,
that's what made them even more powerful.
You're absolutely right. But look, Braun Strowman ended up leaving the Wyatt family and making a name for himself. You see how big of a superstar he is now.
Which is known as the Monster Among Men.
Exactly. But I don't know. Like, yeah, maybe you can compare the Four Horsemen to the Corporation, or you can compare the Fabulous Freebirds to the New Day. But I wouldn't compare it. I'm sorry, Jaden, but that's just me. You know, and also about great factions, you have the Dangerous Alliance. Excellent faction in WCW back in the day. You had beautiful Bobby Eaton. You had the Enforcer Arn Anderson, Larry Sabisco, Ravishing Rick Rude, Stone Cold Steve Austin when he was stunning Steve Austin at the time. And look what happened. All of them became top stars. Unfortunately, Ravishing Rick Rude was no longer with us. But we had Stone Cold transcend from WCW to the WWE and become Stone Cold Steve Austin. But, like I said, you had the Ministry of Darkness too, that waged war on Stone Cold Steve Austin. You had The Undertaker. You had the Acolytes, Viscera, Mideon. That's what made the Acolytes one of the greatest tag teams in the industry.
Now, speaking of that faction, two factions that I would love to see go against each other is the Ministry of Darkness and, surprisingly, the Wyatt family.
No, that's
now those two rivalries are like the dark people, like the crazy people, the lunatic people.
No, you're absolutely right. That's like that darkness.
The people that gives you the creeps.
Exactly. That's that darkness that you see. But I think I would give that to the Ministry of Darkness.
Yes, I agree.
You know, but it's as I said, comparing factions to today compared to in the past, it's kind of different back then. You know, back then it was more attitude era. You know, you also had towards the millennium, we had Legacy. Who could forget about Legacy? Legacy had Randy Orton, Ted DiBiase Jr., and Cody Rhodes.
And don't forget, all three of those guys were the sons of WWE legends.
They were second or third generation wrestlers. So they all did what they had to do, and they paved their way through the industry, try to make a name for themselves. But not too many people could make a name for themselves. One of my personal favorites, they wasn't a big faction, but The Brood. You know, you had Edge, Gangrel, and Christian. They were a pretty good faction. You know, they weren't that much of a strong faction until they joined the Ministry of Darkness. But then they really made a name for themselves when they got up there. When The Undertaker took them in their wing, and, you know, you can't go wrong with that. You know what I mean? But what can you do? It's like, I don't know. I can't.
Now, there's also a faction that I can compare to the Legacy.
Who?
Now, they weren't as much of a faction, but the Dudley Boys, the 3Ds.
That's true.
Spike Dudley, Bubba Ray Dudley,
okay.
And what was the last one?
It was Spike Dudley. Spike Dudley, Devon Dudley, and Bubba Ray Dudley. There you go.
Dudley.
There you go, fans.
Those three men were unstoppable.
In ECW.
They did in
ECW.
Yes.
They came to WWE and tried to create that faction again, but I guess Devon and Bubba Ray didn't want nothing to do with Spike Dudley, so they just kept their tag team. You know, but
that's what I said. It wasn't really a long faction, but in ECW they were a really good faction.
No, of course they were definitely a big faction. You know, but by far, when it comes to old school factions, to me, I have to go with the Four Horsemen. If you want to go with a dominant faction, my pick goes to the NWO. NWO had like 10 members in the NWO. I think they could have destroyed the Shield. They could have destroyed the New Day. Anytime, anywhere. That's just me. I know you probably disagree with that, but hey, it is what it is, fans. That's my pick.
Dad, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Is this true that the NWO was named the NWO when Hulk Hogan joined and changed his name to Hollywood Hogan?
You're absolutely right. And that's what made WCW go into new heights because of the NWO, and that's what made the beginning of the Monday Night Wars, you know, and that's what created the corporation, because the people were comparing the NWO to the corporation, and it was kind of an upside. You know, you couldn't decide, okay, am I going for the corporation or am I going for the NWO? Like, fans were literally tuning in on each channel, like, wow, which one should I watch first? Should I watch the NWO? Should I watch the corporation? And then when the wars were going, DX was formed. People didn't know who to go for. They said, oh man, DX is out there, it's trending, Triple H and Shawn Michaels, but then people were still tuning into the NWO. So that's a good comparison right there. But it's like I said, when it comes to strength, the NWO had the numbers. The Shield, they were strong, they were hungry. They were called the Hounds of Justice. But I don't think they would ever be compared to the NWO.
I can agree to that. Now, the NWO, you're absolutely right. They were powerful, strong-wise, but they all wanted a piece. Like, they all wanted a piece of that person. The Shield, they worked together as a team, and they all built up strength, which made the move the triple powerbomb.
Which, that's you're absolutely right. That was a hell of a finisher. But it's like, when you compare the Shield to, let's say, the Dangerous Alliance, do you honestly think that with Rick Rude, Arn Anderson, and Bobby Eaton, that the Shield can take on guys like that? You know, I don't think so. To me, in my opinion, anyway. But your opinion is different, you know. But there's one other faction we can't forget about there. The Bullet Club. That was AJ Styles, Carl Anderson, and Luke Gallows, which they were a strong faction at the time in New Japan Pro Wrestling and TNA. And then once Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows came to WWE, they tried to form that again, you know. But not too many people wanted to see that. But wrestling fans, this wraps up our topic today. We appreciate you watching our show. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We got a new Twitter account, @eProWrestling. I'm sorry. You can email us your questions at evolutionofprowrestling@gmail.com. Next week, fans, we won't be going live. We're going to be at a wrestling indie show that we will be taking photos. We will be having an interview. But next week, we won't be going live. But we will be posting our new topic come next week. Tune in. Thanks for watching, fans. And watch our interview also with Frank Flo and his son Zombie King Jr. Flo. You don't want to miss it right now on Facebook. Have a good night, fans.
Thank you for watching.